I'm Jim Powell, Editorial Director at TDWI, and I'll be your host. For today's program, we're going to talk about reimagining business in the new normal, the role of data and analytics. Our sponsor is Incorta. For our presentations today, we'll first hear from Tara Ryan, Chief Marketing Officer at Incorta. She'll be followed by Fern Halper with TDWI and Connie Walsh of eCapital Advisors. Before I turn it over to our speakers, I'd like to go over a few basics. Today's presentation will be about 90 minutes long. At the end of their presentations, the speakers will host a question and answer period. If at any time during any of the presentations you'd like to submit a question, just use the Ask a Question area on your screen to type in your question and send it to us. If you have any technical difficulties during the presentation, click on the Help area located below the slide window, and you'll receive technical assistance. If you'd like to discuss this presentation on Twitter with fellow attendees, just include the hashtag TDWI in your tweets. And finally, if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, use the Click Here for a PDF line there on the left middle of your console. In addition, we are recording today's event, and we'll be emailing you a link to the archived version, so you can view the presentation again later if you choose to share it with a colleague. Again, today we're going to talk about reimagining business in the new normal, the role of data and analytics. Our first speaker today is Tara Ryan, Chief Marketing Officer of Incorta. Tara has spent over 25 years in marketing and enterprise software. She started her career in retail marketing and has been a member of the International Council of Shopping Centers and moved on to companies such as Oracle, working with customers including Kellogg's, NetSuite e-commerce that serve thousands of SMBs, and Zebra Technologies that worked with some of the world's largest retailers on driving efficiencies. At those companies, and now at Incorta, Tara is focused on driving measurable value from solutions that focus on data insights at the center of revenue and customer-driven initiatives. Welcome, Tara.
Thanks, Jim. Hello, everyone. On behalf of everyone at Incorta, we're excited to host today's webinar with TDWI and eCapital. Fern and Connie and I hope to inform and share on the role of data-driven analytics and transformation in what we might call the new normal. Although 6 months may seem like years ago for all of us, I don't mean to make light of it in any means, businesses, small and large, have been reacting to and transforming around data in real time in order to thrive. For retailers specifically, which we'll be talking about today, in real-time omni-channel personalization, reducing in-app churn, or just optimizing inventory, it's all been presented to us in a whole new world, specifically for retailers. Speed, accuracy, and the ability to pivot at every level in an organization has changed. From data scientists to analysts, store managers, even inventory clerks, real-time analytics are at our forefront, or should I say our storefront. We're now faced with health information, supply chain pivots on an hourly basis, empowering employees out in fields in separate zip codes, not only with employee data, health data, and specific changes that are happening on the hour. So as Connie and Fern will walk you guys through today, we'll look at retail specifically and how do we all leverage data, the management of our data, the analytics and BI to drive, in the case of retail, the best journey possible. We'll focus, as you'll hear from Connie, on actionable insights around accurate and fast queries and reacting and planning for success. As you can see, many of you are already doing that today and focused on analytic strategies, and we're well on our way, as we were pre-COVID. The real-time customer experience economy has driven digital transformation, and data is at the center of many of our strategies. Connie will talk you through a little bit from eCapital's approach to speed and incisiveness in meeting today's enterprise and retail data analytics demands. And as you can see at Incorta, we're very focused on speed and incisiveness and the ability, especially during COVID, to work with our customers to achieve business value and outcomes. In the case of someone like Shutterfly, for example, how do we pivot and look at supply chain? How do we leverage all of our data sources, in this case EBS, to drive 90% reduction in stockouts? Another one of our customers, and you'll hear from Connie on many more today, are looking at how do they drive business impact? How do we adjust and, again, pivot on things like supply chain, inventory optimization, store manager level empowerment, and data and analytics that can change the course of our business today and have significant business impact. So again, thank you for allowing us to host today's webinar, and look forward to more from Connie and Fern.
Thank you, Tara. Our next speaker today is Fern Halper, who is Senior Research Director for Data Management at TDWI. Well known in the analytics community, Fern has published hundreds of articles, research reports, speeches, and webinars on data mining and information technology during the past 20 years. Fern is also co-author of several dummies books on cloud computing, the hybrid cloud, and big data. She focuses on advanced analytics, including predictive analytics, social media analysis, text analytics, cloud computing, and big data analytics approaches. She has been a partner at industry analyst firm Hurwitz & Associates and a lead analyst for Bell Labs. Her PhD is from Texas A&M University. Fern, I'll turn things over to you here.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today to talk about this important topic. We know that you're busy, and we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. So as part of our research, TDWI wanted to examine the specific impact of COVID-19 on data and analytics professionals. We wanted to understand how the virus had affected them, their jobs, and how they work and the kind of work that they perform. So what I want to talk about today shortly, this will be a brief 10-minute sort of overview of the results of this survey that we did in April of 2020, moving into May of 2020 on COVID-19. And then I also want to talk about so I'll talk about the results of that survey, and then I want to talk about some of the guiding principles around adaptability that we think are important, and Tara has sort of alluded to some of this already. I will say, as I said, that we deployed the survey back in April. About 250 people responded to the survey globally, and of those, 120 were from the United States. And I'll be talking about the U.S. results here. I will say, though, that the trends look basically the same, from the U.S. Versus global. And again, this was from the April-May timeframe. So as we know, COVID-19 has been horrific. It's thrown a wrench into organizations. It's impacted our economy, and obviously, most importantly, it's impacted people's lives. But from the perspective of data and analytics professionals, what we're seeing is that overall layoffs in terms of the companies that these respondents worked for, overall layoffs were about 25% at the time of the survey, and freezes were about at the 50% mark. But for the actual data and analytics professionals themselves, only 13% of data and analytics professionals cited that their companies were either furloughing or laying off people in that area. And that was the case across industries and company sizes. And the majority, slightly over 50% of the respondents, they were concerned, about their jobs, but 40% felt that their employers needed them now more than ever. So we sort of had this split where, even though people had their jobs, some were concerned, about half were concerned, and the other group were thinking that their employers needed them now more than ever. And there were 5% of respondents who said that their employers were still hiring even during the crisis, at that early point in the crisis. So we asked questions about the specific impact that COVID may have had on data and analytics professionals' jobs in terms of the projects that they were doing, hiring, purchasing software, how much travel they could undertake. And of course, what we said, aside from working at home, what other aspects of your job have been impacted? And you could see that the biggest bar there is around travel. And the first one was saying no travel for 6 months. If you go further down on the list, you can see that there was no travel for at least a year, obviously. People have been impacted by this, and if we move forward, since this survey was done in April, May, we're still obviously in that travel restriction. And you can also see that hiring for the data and analytics function in many cases had been frozen or canceled. About 40% said hiring for the analytics function has been frozen. Hiring for the data function, about the same percent. As terms of purchasing software, that was less in terms of the being frozen or canceled. About 30% were saying that software purchases for analytics or data management had been frozen or canceled. Likewise, even less than that in terms of the types of initiatives that people would be undertaking. And you could see further down on this list, only about 12% said that nothing has been impacted. So we also asked if working from home had any impact on the respondents' ability to do their jobs, and about 40% said that it had no impact. Many were already working remotely. Others stated that it was fine. According to one respondent who said, not at all. I've been working from home for over 10 years, and I was shocked that my lifestyle was termed quarantine. So a quarter of the respondents said that it may have been a little harder to collaborate with colleagues, but those who already worked from home felt that there was more collaboration with everyone working from home versus being split. So in some ways, it had evened the playing field. Now, what we really wanted to see, though, was how COVID had impacted the nature of analytics work. So I'm talking about, the kinds of analytics that are being performed, and how data and analytics professionals are working. Anecdotally, we're hearing things like organizations are facing operational and strategic challenges. They're looking to do things like building new models to understand COVID. They're doing much more forecasting, for example. They're dealing with intelligent product substitution, looking for the right resources to send to certain areas. In healthcare, obviously, preparing for new patients, looking at the magnitude of the event, what the infection curves look like, looking at their response. Obviously, as Tara mentioned, there has been, impact on the supply chain, so that's been a big area of focus. And even things like putting out new programs because of COVID, looking at fraud in new programs. In retail, we're hearing anecdotally about dealing with inventory placement. We're hearing a lot about better customer service using virtual agents, and that's not just in retail. Of course, everyone wants to understand their customers better. They want to understand their spending patterns. They want to understand how communities are going to be hit and be able to pivot from that. In manufacturing, they want to understand what does the supply chain look like. And obviously, that's what we're seeing in this data. So more than 50% of the respondents, so we said, how has the nature of your work been changed? And you could see that more than 50% of the respondents are saying that they're being asked to answer new kinds of questions. So as I mentioned, all of those new kinds of questions, and Connie will talk about more of that. About a third were saying that they needed to add new attributes and features to their analyses. So that makes sense given what I was just talking about. You can also see other impacts too, like being asked to frequently revise revenue forecasts, needing to update models and other analytics, because obviously what was true in the past may not be true now, and even being asked to integrate new data sources into our data systems, right? Because we're asking new types of questions that often require new types of data, and organizations are looking, towards health data, maybe if they hadn't looked at weather data and other demographic types of data, and psychographic, geographic, all sorts of data that's specific to COVID, or specific to their customers or their operations. Some respondents to the survey mentioned that, in some ways, they were now getting to do more analyses, doing more advanced analysis they hadn't been able to do before, and that their analysis is getting visibility because organizations are more interested in the results of that, and they realize that they need to do that. In some instances, although lower at about 20-something%, if you look further down on this chart, some respondents were saying that we need to do more analysis with fewer resources. So the upshot, though, is that digital transformation is accelerating. We see the sense of urgency to accelerate the use of analytics to solve business problems. When I say digital transformation here, I'm talking about the integration of digital technology into the business. And we've certainly seen past waves of this. We saw it with the internet in the 90s. We saw it with e-commerce in the 2000s. This wave is about using advanced analytics such as AI technologies to change how businesses operate and provide value. So clearly data and analytics is at the heart of this most recent digital transformation. And as I said, we see this sort of accelerating anecdotally. Pre-COVID, when we'd ask about digital transformation, more than 95% of the respondents to our surveys would say that they need to digitally transform in order to compete. And, now more than ever, they're needing to do this. So, for instance, we're hearing from organizations that are moving to the cloud earlier. They may have planned to move to the cloud as part of their digital transformation strategy, but now they're accelerating that move to the cloud. As I mentioned, and as we saw in the previous chart, we hear that organizations are planning to ingest new data types to improve their analytics, and that organizations are relying on data-driven decisions more often. So there are some guiding principles that I think are important in terms of organizations dealing with constantly changing conditions such as we find ourselves in now. They're going to need to understand where they are now and plan for how to move forward in this dynamic environment. So that's going to include gaining insights into customer behaviors, which impacts products and pricing and optimizing supply chains, and then constantly updating revenue forecasts. And all of that, of course, is the bread and butter of analytics. And as organizations plan for the new normal, they're going to also need to examine their current workforce, their production activities, their services strategies, and how to come out of COVID-19 to be stronger and more agile, because change is going to be a given. Adaptability is going to be a must. Organizations are going to need to be more agile and pivot, pretty rapidly, as Tara was talking about. So it's interesting because the Boston Consulting Group did some research that indicates that during the past 4 previous global economic downturns, there was this group of about 14% of companies that were actually able to increase both sales growth and profit margins during those downturns. And they talked about the fact, and these are good studies to read, about how to navigate uncertain supply and demand, being able to adjust to disruptions in operations and supply chains, and being able to allocate their workforces to be able to adjust to changes in consumer confidence and priorities. And all of these are areas where analytics can help. So the goal, really in using the analytics to be adaptable and agile and innovative is to get out ahead of issues before they occur and be able to adapt and to pivot. So that's what Connie's going to be talking about, some examples of how organizations are doing that in the retail industry. So, and I'll be asking her questions. You haven't gotten rid of me yet, but that this is my part of the presentation. I'll be asking Connie some questions during hers. So thank you. And with that, let me turn it back over to Jim to introduce Connie.
Thank you, Fern. Just a quick reminder to our audience, if you have a question, you can enter it at any time in the Ask a Question window. We'll be answering audience questions in the final portion of our program. Our next speaker is Connie Walsh, Senior Director of Transformation at eCapital Advisors. Connie is responsible for helping her clients transform their business through optimization of technology investments and business process improvements. She has over 25 years of business leadership experience across planning, data analytics, buying, inventory, allocation, and operations. Hello, Connie.
Thank you, Jim. Hi, how are you? Happy to be here and talk about things that I'm very passionate about, and that's retail and using data analytics to drive business results. So thanks for having me today. So I'm going to be talking about focusing primarily on retail. Now, keep in mind, I know many of you are not retailers, but I think most of these things that we're talking about today apply to not just retail, but apply to most industries. Fern and Tara, feel free to jump in and add commentary along the way, thoughts along the way. I want to make sure this is interactive. Any questions, yeah, feel free to jump in. So over the past few months, we've experienced so much change in our world, and retail has been particularly impacted by COVID. The brick and mortar stores are shutting down. Companies had to pivot most of their business online, at least for certain time periods, and move to other channels like buy online, pick up in store, or pick up on curbside. Business is moving faster than ever. So the real question here is, did COVID-19 push retailers into bankruptcy, or did some fail to transform by not using data and insights? We can see here a list of, again, retailers filing for bankruptcy. It's estimated that over 12,000 and some say up to 15,000 stores could close this year, compared to 9,500 last year. So again, what was the turning point for retailers? Was COVID the turning point? And could data and analytics have helped some of these retailers adjust, whether it was business models around assortment, inventory levels, or operations to stay afloat?
Yes, so Connie, this is Fern. So we're seeing, obviously, we saw retailers filing for bankruptcy. I mean, there's obviously other industries, hospitality, also having issues. What about other industries that are seeing the signals? You know, is it too late for them?
No, I would say it's definitely, I think the important thing is to really be able to listen to the customers and have that relationship with the customer to understand where they're at. I think it's important to really read the signs and signals along the way, and that means having the right data available. And Fern, you said it earlier also, there are a lot more questions that are being asked, and that's going to require a different way of looking at your business. So companies have to evolve to really keep up, and that applies to not just retail, but all industries.
And I would add as well, I think many enterprises, the focus on what you termed digital transformation, and in the case of retail, the real-time customer experience economy, all the strategies and preparedness and organization around data and data management, and now being able to leverage that preparedness through COVID, whether it's through airlines, what was being worked on for real-time customer experience, loyalty, proprietary relationships or systems, and now coming to the terms where we have to leverage all of it in real time.
Yep, great. Thank you for that. And we know mass merchants benefited during COVID in terms of sales volume. Some are posting record high levels due to higher demand along with their ability at that point in time. Some were allowed to be open during COVID. But again, many of those were on the forefront of acknowledging the customers and where they were in terms of shopping behavior. They were already had pivoted to online, and they were ready to pivot even more online, or move to buy online, pick up in store, or buy online, pick up at curbside. But on the right-hand side of the screen, you can also see categories that benefited from COVID. And whether you're a large, medium, or small-sized company, you can really improve your bottom line profitability by asking the right questions and digging deeper into your data. So here again, it wasn't just the mass merchants that did well, it was the essentials business, grocery, outdoor. As people started working from home, a lot more interest in home office and home improvement. So lots of trends occurring within the business.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that companies are pivoting to use analytics for all kinds of things, from internet and technology companies using it to review content, and companies that are using more advanced, using analytics, that they had put in place sort of beforehand, and were able to do things like with IT workers working from home, being able to monitor their servers, remotely, that sort of thing, for security breaches. But how are companies reacting to classifications that are working? Are they doing more of the same? How is that working?
Yeah, that's a good question. So companies, I would say, are quickly reacting by adjusting inventory levels, or, whoops, I just changed the screen. Sorry about that. Let me go back. By adjusting, inventory levels, it could be adjusting assortments or marketing messages. For example, during COVID, where women's business was stronger than men's, or tops better than bottoms due to more folks on visual and working remotely, loungewear much stronger than workwear. The importance around inventory levels, assortments, pricing, and then the other big piece was messaging was a big piece. So, and really getting much more personalized in the messaging. So, for example, when COVID hit and we were looking at New York being very significantly affected or severely affected by COVID, maybe at that time messaging around product was maybe not the right option at that point. Maybe was much more personalized message, like a thinking of you message, versus selling product to that customer. So just being able to pivot really around, again, inventory, assortment, pricing, marketing, messaging, and being much more personalized and thoughtful in that approach. Go ahead, Tara.
Yeah, and I would add that I think when we go back, as I said, it seems like years ago, but even 6 months ago, Fern, being able to accommodate C-suite, inquiries or questions. We saw many customers pull in HCM or HR data, contractor or supplier data, CLM systems to find out, where supplier contracts were, again, and a lot of supply chain pivots. So those data sources and being able to, go right back up to the C-suite and answer those questions or accommodate those pivots with data.
Great. So next we're going to talk about examples of disruption in the marketplace. Again, COVID is one example, but there are so many other disruptions or externalities that impact your business, whether it's competition, weather, gas prices, unemployment, to name a few. So here are common challenges that we hear in the marketplace today within retail. Some of these may apply to your business, others may not, but really there are still companies in Excel-based technologies or out-of-date technologies. Teams are not able to get timely information and meaningful insights quickly or pivot very quickly, and they're lacking people, process, and technology. Or they have data, but it's very difficult to ingest external data. So the importance of external combined with internal is a tremendous challenge in the marketplace. So every company has room to expand upon and utilize data in different ways for improvement. So these are the common challenges that we hear. There's more data available today than ever. We often see organizations being overwhelmed with that. I mean, if you compare it to even 5-10 years ago, the amount of data is incredible. But the important thing that you need to remember is don't tackle everything at one time. If you're making a long list of opportunities, really just pick a few quick wins that can provide meaningful and value to your organization and to your customer. So next we're going to go through, I'd like to introduce our 4 pillars of retail analytics and how you can focus your organization's efforts by increasing loyalty of your customer and overall growing your bottom line results. I'm just going to show each one here. So really the 4 pillars are knowing your customer, empowering your employees, and when we talk about employees, we really mean all business units and cross-functional teams. Delivering on an intelligent supply chain, and that's of course within your own organization and then any kind of partners that you're working with in the marketplace. And then talking about the future state of retail and continuing to get in front of what your customer needs and keeping up with those external factors that could really impact your business. Our first pillar that I mentioned is such an important one is knowing your customer. In my past in retail, it was difficult to understand or view that complete customer. We saw them as a shopper online and another customer in brick and mortar or shopping brick and mortar. But the ability to have that complete customer lens and understand the shopping behavior of that customer gives us insights to better prepare for your next interaction with them. It's so important to read the signs and signals of what the customer needs. Who's shopping? What are they buying? What about timing of their purchase? Where are they shopping and transacting? And how they're buying and why they're buying something. And all of these questions will allow you to gain that full 360-degree view of that customer and allow you to meet them where they are. Who is your customer? So in the past, and not too distant past, retailers could see transactions occurring, but we really had a difficult time connecting customers who shop both in-store and online. And as we all know that today's customers are much more sophisticated in how they shop, and they expect a seamless experience moving across channels or categories. And I think we've all had experiences like this where you walk in to a brick and mortar store and you shop online, and they're very different experiences. That creates a complete disconnect as a customer. So the importance of that is critical. And internal data is only a part of knowing who the customer is. Using external data to get to know your customer is really important. And this will allow you to really, the importance of using also demographic information will also allow you to create the right assortment, again, the right inventory levels for different channels, the right pricing, and the right messaging. And another one here is really understanding how much your business is new versus repeat. That's one example here. Or whether a customer is he or she shopping reg price, promo price, clearance price, and how do you serve up better messaging and assortment and pricing for those customers. So what is your customer purchasing? I think this to me is one of the most interesting parts of retail is the ability to look at the data any which way you want, and we talk about attributes. So the ability to quickly pivot from looking at top sellers to what's in the basket or the composition of the basket will allow you to quickly glean insights and make business adjustments. So think about all the product attributes from color and size, brand, size, all of those. The important piece is the ability to get to that lowest node while keeping the data intact. And Incorta's direct data platform does a great job of that. I mean, I remember many times in retail on Monday, business reviews, our weekly meetings where questions were asked, and we could not, either we had different numbers within the room, or we were not able to get the answers that we were asking. We were not able to get to that lowest detail, whether it was the SKU or transaction. Some of these could have been why was margin low in a specific category, or why your average unit retail was much higher than last year for a specific location. Incorta allows you to pivot data any which way, directly accessing data sources, and then providing all teams consistency and ease of getting there. So to me, this is a game changer in the marketplace. When is the customer buying? We've seen significant changes here, whether it's the frequency of purchasing or the timing of visits. This data is so important and meaningful for retailers. And it's critical, again, that you may have the right assortment, but what about having the right timing of inventory, or allowing and ensuring that your labor is aligned to the customer shopping behavior? Again, this real-time data is critical to keep up with competition and to meet the customer where they are. We all know that there is a significant shift to digital. It's expected, believe it or not, this is a huge number, but 25% of retail purchases will be online by 2023, with 2019 was about 14% of global. So moving from 14 to 25%. I believe that COVID has probably pushed that, but really for those retailers not up online, it's critical to get there. And understanding why customers made a purchase online versus in store will help you better understand how to position inventory, for example.
And I think I would add, Connie, here that much like any other industry, the shifts that we're seeing, I read recently that what typically in retail would take 3 years as far as a shift, and the doubling and almost tripling of online sales just since COVID is almost breathtaking. So it's a matter of really, as you point out, making sure that on, not just a weekly basis, but on a daily basis, we have access to all of this data.
Yeah, very true. Thank you. There are so many more options on how customers are shopping today, but you really want to be able to identify what's working and what's not working, and being able to see what's being purchased at different points and understanding the bottom line profitability. So identifying trends that are occurring within your business will ensure that your cross-functional teams are aligned on strategy. So now you think about all these different connection points, whether it's your team or your manufacturer or your vendors or your operations. It's critical that you are there for the customer and meet that customer again where they are. The customer is often combining how they shop, from using mobile devices to transacting in store, and getting at this information and understanding this information will help you better communicate with your customer. During COVID, many retailers connected with new customers by bucketing your product types or attributes around why the customer is shopping. This is an interesting one. It's a different dimension, but it will give you additional data to really understand how to connect with that customer. So, for example, if the customer is lapsed, to better understand why they have not shopped with you, were you out of stock in certain basics during a time period, or did you change your pricing position and it impacted your relationship? This is really important to connect with your customers on an emotional level. So pulling in any kind of data around how your customer, why your customer is shopping you is really important. So it's so important to allow your employees. So this is the second pillar, is empowering your employees. And again, when we talk about employees, we're really talking about your entire business units, the folks working in stores, on your finance team and your operations, on the manufacturing side. But it's so important to allow your employees across all business units to have the data they need to not only manage their jobs, but ask the right questions. So I think this kind of shows, we come from this consistent reporting and delivering of reporting and dashboards, but if we can engage our employees to be curious and ask a lot more questions and allow them self-service through technology, I think that is a game changer. Great news is that employee engagement is at a historic high, according to Gallup. And we all know what that means, is that we get higher productivity. But just picture where your store operations or finance employees were able to answer all their own questions without relying on IT or taking days or even weeks to dig through data in Excel. Allowing employees the ability to access data and use that data for decision making will make for happier customers and lead to overall bottom line profitability. And here the important one is the ability to really kind of, and Fern, you brought this up earlier, is really that flexible. The KPIs that you're looking at this week may be different than what you want to for next week or for tomorrow. So really breaking down any silos having your organization and allowing each team to really dig into the data and explore the data is critical.
Yeah, we're seeing that self-service, even before COVID, that self-service analytics or, being able to self-serve and do your own analysis was the top priority for 2020 with many people in our audience. And you can definitely see that in this time period that would be really important as well. What are some of the other additional benefits to putting updated modern technology in your data environment that you're seeing? Obviously cost savings from optimizing and eliminating duplicate efforts, but are you seeing other specific metrics?
Yeah, well, I would say, an added benefit would be retiring tools or legacy systems that are not performing for them. That's a big deal. I would say the ability also, for example, management of inventory and the visibility of inventory at all levels is beneficial. And then, of course, again, it brings the team, just having data out there, it allows teams to come together to really talk about what they want to look at as an organization and how their data supports their strategies. So again, to your point, cost savings, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, sure. I would add, Fern, to your question, we're seeing, even to your point, self-service, but if it's a finance department, they may be out in a field, they may be at a distribution center. They, for the first time, may want to integrate with marketing clouds, customer data platform, CDPs. They may want to be more in tune with the marketing department and looking at attribution, as Connie just mentioned, on who's responding to what marketing campaigns now based on previous purchase patterns, and as well emotions and what may even be happening within their zip code around COVID.
Yeah, I'll give you another example, and this is not a retail example, but it's a medical device company that we have worked with. And our team provided self-service for the employees on AR and collection, so aging of AR. And it was amazing how within days they took a situation that would have taken weeks, and they had information within their hands within minutes. So really, just to see those employees and how excited they were to actually have the data to get their jobs done is, pretty impactful. All right, our third pillar is around delivering the intelligent supply chain. There are so many areas we could focus in on here. Many retailers have experienced demand shifts and extremes, like COVID, that sent their supply chains into chaos. But how do companies remain flexible and ready to pivot when necessary in order to meet the customer where they are? So I've selected just a few topics here that I think are very important. Again, you can pick through which ones provide greatest value to your organization, but I'd like to walk through a few of these. An extreme shift to digital. This is one we've heard in the marketplace over and over, and we've seen this one coming for years, but I think, again, COVID just sped things up. Those who were not online quickly pivoted to get online to stay in business. And, of course, those companies that already had a strong online business pivoted to all online. We know of companies that achieved their entire business plan by moving from brick and mortar and online to all online and were successful. So I think with this thoughtful and flexible approach, you can utilize inventory across the channels, including ship from store. You can pump up messaging online to account, for example, to offset larger weekend traffic that would have occurred in brick and mortar stores. And you can quickly adjust promotions to work your way through unproductive inventory. So an extreme shift to digital, which is, again, the shift to digital has really provided flexibility for retailers. Cash flow. We've never heard so much conversation around cash flow than when COVID hit. And the importance of sales forecasts and aligning inventory margins markdowns are critical. Many companies that were focused on cash flow on a monthly basis quickly needed to move to weekly or even daily. And some steps were for retailers to create additional promotions from aged inventory or promote products based on missed sales plans. But having all of this data in one central hub in a direct data platform allows you to manage these large, complex data, and that's a game changer. So during times like COVID, and there will be other external factors that impact business, you really need the ability to quickly get at data, analyze, and then take action. And again, Tara, you brought this up earlier, it really has been a shift to monthly or weekly data down to, or weekly or monthly data down to daily level.
Agreed.
Supplier fill rates, so order fill rates are really important, obviously, in the supply chain, but using external data from your vendor or suppliers, like when product is available, or if there's something back ordered or something is discontinued, pulling this data into your reporting can be very beneficial. You may have to adjust an online offer or pricing or website based on this information. Return rates, this is an interesting one. So as we shift, the entire business has shifted to online, obviously, in retail, but it comes with a trending higher return rate. So tracking return rate by product, customer, vendor, or category is critical, but also you want to understand why this occurred. So if you're able to access return data, you could quickly move to was size an issue, then do I need a message on the website that you need to either change your size to up or down. If you see consistent high trends happening in a brand due to quality issues, you can decide whether you want to adjust your assortment. But this number is pretty shocking. 30 to 40% of clothing and shoes purchased online are returned. Along the same lines, companies are experiencing increased shipping fees due to the shift online and shift directly to the customer. And to remain competitive, in many cases, retailers are absorbing the cost. But I think the opportunity lies in not just pushing the cost to the bottom line, but allocating these costs to the appropriate business units, customers, categories, or products, and really report on the true profitability at any level. Again, it sounds like a lot of data to be pushed down to each level of the organization or down to the lowest level, but Incorta's ability to handle large amounts of data is incredible. And when you have the data, you can then thoughtfully take steps to optimize costs across the organization. Last but not least is turnover. This is a very important one for retailers, is the ability to really ensure that the assortment is right from the beginning and that you've really put the right assortment levels based on demand. This is more important than ever. And the ability to see what product is working, whether sizes, colors, brands, collections are working, you really want to be sure that you can see that information all the way down to the lowest level. And we've heard a lot of retailers who still cannot see down to that level where their inventory is. This is a critical one.
And I would add, Connie, as we shift towards the fall and seasons, even, coming up to Thanksgiving, how do we plan and forecast against the new normal or the unknown? And many retailers are facing those issues today.
Absolutely. Well, that's the other thing that we have seen is a lot of the retailers were talking about how to get in stock, but there was also a definite need to look at overstocks or aged inventory. So how could companies turn inventory into cash? So the ability to really look at, to Tara's point, ensuring that your forecasts are accurate, but taking care of aged inventory or old inventory or just slow-moving inventory is critical. So here's a customer example that's taken real time to heart. So solving their most complex supply chain issues with speed and incisiveness. So 99% increase in speed of analysis and 90% reduction out of stocks, or in 90% reduction in stockouts at incredible speeds. So what used to take 2 to 3 days now delivered in sub-seconds for this photo retailer, so pretty incredible. So if this sounds like something that you would like to have a conversation about, raise your hand in the chat, and we'd love to have a further conversation with you on that. So the future of retail, this is a huge opportunity, is reimagining what the future state looks like. So again, we talked about the full, complete business plans. There's also predictive insights and machine learning that has to happen. And a very important piece of it is not just internal or new, not just internal data, but also new and external data is critical. Here, if you look at over 50% of retailers are using external data in their analysis, but over 90% said that they needed additional external data, but 54% said that they're increasing spending on it. Whether you're a small, medium, or large-sized retailer, the use of external data can put you at a huge competitive advantage. And when companies are leading the way in terms of using data and analytics, they're using predictive, for example, to more accurately forecast consumer trends. They're sending signals to other cross-functional units to align demand and overall operational activity.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing more organizations being interested in external data sources and even sort of their data that's unique to them, that's internal, that may not be structured, for more predictive analytics efforts, and that's, basically across the board. We've seen demand for predictive analytics increase, actually increase, year over year pretty significantly. What have you seen as important external data sources that companies are incorporating into their strategies in the retail sector? Just curious about that. Did we lose Connie?
I think we may have lost Connie, but Fern, this is Tara. I can answer that. I think what's interesting is I think back to, it's not retail, but I think about, even travel and airlines leveraging, it's not just your seat anymore or what gate you're boarding at. It's leveraging traffic information, parking, lines through security. And so, almost unlimited external data sources now come into the real-time customer experience. And I think retailers specifically after COVID have had to pull in, as I mentioned earlier, human capital management systems. You may be integrating Workday with some Oracle financials. You may be looking at Johns Hopkins data, zip code data. What does the state dictate? What is the law? Connie just mentioned returns. Here in California, you can't, or at least when I was told at a Target recently, you can't physically return something you've purchased in the store because of COVID and health concerns. So I think, it's almost all data sources. We've even heard from customers mention this term all. I need to leverage all of my data sources. So many new external data sources, including weather. So I think that's what Connie's slide is on. I don't know if you're back, Connie.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Okay. No worries. Hopefully I answered your question okay.
Of course, this was happened to me. Sorry, everybody. So weather, I just heard you say weather, Tara. One thing that we have seen used also in the marketplace is using weather information for taking appropriate markdowns for cold weather product or hot weather product, that's a critical one. Others could be around openings. Like we talked about golf course openings. When COVID hit, there were golf courses within certain zip codes that were opening, but to have that information if you're a sporting goods retailer is very important. And then other ones with, I think, Tara, I heard you talking about COVID, but when COVID hit again, we were looking at down to the zip code, geo level product mix across the industry, which provided some pretty interesting and useful insights. And then another example was a spirits company where we looked at top grossing zip codes and geos by product mix, and we could see, for example, the different flavors working better in the Southwest versus in the Midwest or the East. So really interesting analytics that provided.
And are companies getting this data? Are they, just sort of going out and doing sort of one-off, I need this data, let me get it? Or do you see them sort of using the new marketplaces that are springing up, or it just really depends on the use case?
Yeah, I think it's both. In some cases, it's just a one. We've taken information directly just out of Excel spreadsheets and dropped it in to align it with the data to quickly gain some insights. But I would say it's both. It's all the above. Some is a little bit more structured, like from Johns Hopkins, a little bit more structured data, but weather, obviously, much more structured data. So it depends.
Yeah, there's a lot of data out there, that's for sure. A lot of external sources.
And then here's a benefit of many benefits of using the direct data platform. And we've talked about most of these, but again, and Fern, some of these things were, guiding principles that you talked about. We didn't align our slides or our messaging, but Fern, I would say, having this flexibility and this speed to value and improved overall employee morale, like all these things mean a lot when you're trying to get at the questions that you're asking within the business. But to have a platform where the entire organization can get on board and ask the questions that they're wanting to answer and get actual results in a very fast way, it's pretty impactful to your business. And again, I do want to talk about small, medium, or large-sized company. What we're seeing is that large companies are not the only ones who get to play in this space. I would say because of the solutions being cloud-based, a lot of small and medium-sized companies, I think, are much more. They're almost getting up and running faster than large-sized companies can. So I think what's been fun to watch is all size companies get to play. And then overall improved business outcome would be, you can see these are just a few, but all the way from improved in-stocks, better turnover, improved sales, bottom line profitability, converting at a higher rate. All of these things really improve your overall business and bottom line results. So my last point would really be, if you're a retailer or if you're in another industry, how do you take action? So what can you take away from what we're sharing today? Whether it's knowing your customer, empowering your employees, focusing on the supply chain or the future of retail, and pulling in external data. What are some things that you can do today to improve your customer loyalty and overall improve your bottom line margins? And with that, Jim, I'll hand it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Connie. Let's move into our Q&A period now, and I'm going to begin with a question for Fern. Why are organizations speeding their move to cloud in light of COVID-19?
All right, that was something that I mentioned in terms of digital transformation. So anecdotally, we're seeing that organizations are moving to the cloud, and for the reasons probably that you'd think, and some that were even mentioned here. Obviously, scalability and flexibility. If they're looking to the future and doing more predictive analytics, oftentimes, they're looking for the cloud for some of these newer activities, because the cloud can scale up, it can scale down, it can handle, versus your traditional data warehouse that may be as good at dealing with structured data and reports and dashboards. Some of the cloud data warehouses, cloud data lakes, and other platforms, can actually help with the scalability, elasticity, flexibility there, for the analytics itself. So that's one of the reasons I think that organizations are trying to move to the cloud. Also, just having someone manage it for them, in case IT isn't there. But a lot of it, is around being able to do more analyses, especially more analysis. And of course, modern analytics is like the main driver for modernizing your data infrastructure, and the cloud is, one of the ways to do that. And especially if your data is being generated in the cloud, it makes sense to analyze it there. Large amounts of data generated in the cloud makes sense to analyze it there. So those are just some of the reasons I think that, organizations are moving to the cloud, accelerating their move to the cloud during this time, and cost, of course.
Okay, let's move on to a question for all three of you. What's the role of AI in real-time analytics?
Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I can.
I'm like 45 minutes talking about that.
Yeah, I would say.
Do we have all day?
Yeah. So the real-time analytics, I think inventory real-time analytics is really important, because if you look at how the customer is shopping, they're no longer just shopping in brick and mortar. They're shopping online. They're shopping buy online, pick up at curbside, pick up in store. There's so many different channels of how they can shop. So the importance of really connecting and ensuring that your data is connected real time is important. And, Incorta's direct data platform does that. You can be updating information, at any level that you want. It could be every 15 minutes. If needed, it could be every 5 minutes. So the importance of real time is more important than ever. And again, we still know of retailers who don't have inventory visibility down to location level. So lots of opportunity there.
I mean, I would just add in terms of real time, outside of retail, we're definitely seeing more interest in real time depending on how you define real time. But if you think about COVID and think about, people not being on site and being able to do predictive maintenance and being able to address issues in real time, as well, we see those types of use cases were important pre-COVID. So I can only imagine that they're also important in this new normal. And automating and AI and predictive analytics comes in a lot when you're talking about automating anything, and we're seeing more of a move to automation during this time.
Okay, let's move on to this next question. There is a glut of publicly available data on COVID infection rates and mortality. How do we filter through the noise to identify what will make a decision-making impact for our business?
So I can take that one. And we've talked about COVID a lot throughout this presentation, but what we have seen is where companies pulled COVID data by zip code or geo and really looked at the differences of product category selling. And this is pretty useful information because you can adjust inventory levels and messaging around that. And say, for example, if women's apparel is doing much better than men's or tops better than bottoms, based on the video conferencing that is happening, you can really adjust your messaging. So when I mentioned this earlier, but when New York was experiencing a surge in cases, maybe company messaging or "we're here for you" would have been a much more appropriate message than a sales pitch. So I believe customers remember those small touch points, when they're going through a tough time. So I think it's just, again, it's not always the sales, but it's the connection with the customer as well.
Okay. In this current environment of social distancing and remote access for businesses, The effectiveness of websites, advertising, and social media campaigns are of extreme importance, and they require new metrics. So how are these metrics standardized among multiple industries?
I can take that one, Jim, being a CMO. Did we have to shift? I think when we look at the effectiveness of social media, even search advertising, obviously out of home, has become a lot less important. But as major brands, or especially retailers, how are we driving both brick and mortar and online customer experiences, as well as driving revenue? How are we cheering and nurturing and leveraging social media and our websites? How are we handling, 10x traffic? And again, how did we shift in our creative and our messaging to be authentic and focused on the health concerns that our customers, as marketers, we had initiatives around corporate social responsibility. How have we managed to navigate around, political upheavals as well as COVID? So it has been a tumultuous year, to say the least, for businesses, not just in retail, on how to address their customers and drive revenue and loyalty. And so what metrics do we look at? I think it is leveraging different data sources. And I know as a marketer, as I mentioned earlier, customer data platforms, the marketing clouds are being put to use and at task for things like Telium or Imparticle or Salesforce, really looking at, regardless of the number of instances or customizations you've had on those systems of record or applications, defining new metrics that are in the time frames, as Connie and Fern mentioned, of days and weeks and a month rather than quarter and seasons.
Okay, let's move on to visualization. What are the best visualizations to use for telling the story of how a business is being affected?
So I can take that. I would say, Incorta, the direct data platform, is pretty powerful in terms of analyzing or discovering and visualizing. It's a visualization tool that uses semantics to simplify search and queries. And users can really, what's nice about it is users can personalize the data, apply filters, and really drill into the details. What I have found is like a best visualization, and it offers many different options around how you want to look at the data. But the COVID example, for example, that was a great example with our team looking at COVID data and using heat maps across the country. You could see specific states that were affected by COVID. You could look at specific categories that were working very well. So, Incorta is a true self-service data experience with a wide variety of easy-to-use visualization. And we would love to talk with you. If there are other questions around that, we can absolutely have further conversation with you and actually share and do a demo for you around the actual tool.
Well, here's a question from a mid-sized retailer who asks, how do I keep up with the large-sized retailers who invest so much in technology and data?
I'll take that. So that is, I kind of talked about this earlier. So I believe, so the concern would be, obviously mass merchants are doing so well, and it's the mid-small-sized companies that are challenged right now in many cases. But from my experience, again, I mentioned this earlier, but size of company does not align with how new or advanced they can be in terms of data. And again, I think in some ways, small, mid-sized companies can pivot much faster and get their organization aligned on what data they want to look at. And again, here is, really focusing in on a few areas and that can overall provide great return on investment. And what's, I think, great about it, Incorta is it's no longer, I remember the days it was 1 to 2 years, and Tara, you talked about this a little bit earlier, but 1 to 2 years worth of an implementation, that's not the deal anymore. So we can get up and running within weeks versus years. So speed to insight is greater than ever. And I would say this data and analytics, I'm passionate about helping small and mid-sized retailers as well.
All right. Well, let me take a moment to thank our speakers today. We've heard today from Fern Halper at TDWI, Tara Ryan with Incorta, and Connie Walsh with eCapital Advisors. And again, thank you to Incorta for sponsoring today's program. Please remember that we've recorded today's program and we'll be emailing you a link to the archived version of the presentation. Feel free to share that with colleagues. And if you'd like a copy of the slides, please be sure to use the click here for a PDF option. Finally, I want to remind you that TDWI offers a wealth of information, including the latest research reports, webinars, and information on business intelligence, data warehousing, and a host of related topics. So I encourage you to tap into that expertise at tdwi.org. And with that, from all of us here today, let me say thank you very much for attending. This concludes today's event.